Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch-Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Ryan Bishop, Assistant Principal at Wasatch High School in Heber City, Utah. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Thanks, Hutch. I feel pretty privileged that I'm on here. I've seen all these wonderful episodes and all this podcasting you've been doing, and I finally had to beg you to let me on. I appreciate it. I didn't get invited. For anybody listening, I didn't get invited. I finally had to say to one day to Hutch, like, "Hey, man, you going to put me on your podcast?" So thank you for letting me beg you to put me on.
And then how long did it take to get on? When you had students in your office, we had to reschedule.
Yeah, we had to reschedule about 5 times, which is my fault. And that's why Hutch hasn't ever had me on, because I'm flaky. So Thank you for putting up with me, Hutch.
Not a problem. Let's have you begin by sharing with our audience here in Utah and across the nation where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Well, I grew up in Utah. I was born in Heber City. My mom and dad both coached and taught in Heber City, and we moved when I was young, just as I was probably starting elementary school. My dad got a job at Cedar High, and my mom also worked at Cedar High, got a job at that time. And so I grew up in Cedar City, and my mom was a longtime educator at Cedar High School, and my dad was a longtime athletic director and football coach and director of development at Southern Utah University. And I graduated from Cedar High and then stuck around and went to SUU and graduated and from SUU, and I've had a wonderful opportunity since I graduated with my degree down there to work in some phenomenal school districts. I spent 4 years in Box Elder County school district, where I coached and taught, and I spent 13 years in Davis School District, where I coached and taught and got my admin and was able to do some TSA stuff, and getting my feet wet with admin and some athletic director things. And then I spent 3 years at the state and enjoyed every minute of that and being able to build relationships all across this state. And then the last about 6.5 years, I've been back at Wasatch, where it all started for me, and living in Heber City and at Wasatch High. So it's been a fun ride, and I really feel like, because of my educational experience, I could live and work in any town or county or city in this state, because there's so many great educators out there, and athletic directors in the high schools, and teachers and coaches. And it's been so awesome for me to really build relationships all over the state. And I feel like Utah's my home, not Cedar, Heber. I feel like I call the entire state my home. And a lot of that is just because of the educational relationships that I've been able to build with people over the years.
That's excellent. Let's have you talk for a minute about the youth sports opportunities growing up. By the time you started playing youth sports, you were probably down in Cedar. So I assume they've got leagues down there, maybe not quite as big as Salt Lake County, but certainly with the coaching factory at the university, they've got to have places for kids to play.
Yeah. And I mean, as everybody knows, it's so different now. And I mean, we have these awesome, good young coaches in our building, like everywhere else. And a lot of the younger people getting into education and coaching and teaching have a way different experience with, their youth sport experience than like what you and I have or had. Right. And, and so it's really cool now that at least I try to see it as cool, that we're navigating in the system. We're navigating comp leagues and AAU and accelerated and camps, and people paying to go to quarterback camps and point guard camps and, all these things. And then it all culminates back at the high school, all the soccer clubs that's going on. and it culminates back at the high school, and then we have to deal with it, right? And so a lot of our good young coaches that we have on staff right now at Wasatch kind of came up in that system, which I didn't. I mean, back in the day, my experience was, my dad ran summer camps for SUU, or, at the time SUSC. And my experience was, getting to go to a wrestling camp, and I wasn't even a wrestler because my dad was helping to run it, or getting to go to a basketball camp with Bill Evans 30 years ago, who was the basketball coach, because he ran it. And we didn't have all these opportunities. I mean, we played rec sports. You signed up through the rec league. You were on the national or the American, and it ran for 6 weeks and it was over. Right. Or you got to go to these camps, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in a town that had a university that offered some of those, and my dad was involved. And so I got to go. And, we kind of did everything. And sometimes I joke a little bit, and times have changed, that, growing up, I wrestled in middle school, then I played basketball in high school, and then I was on the baseball team. And, Bob Scheck-Snyder said, hey, come out and throw the discus. And so then you'd go run track, and, and meanwhile you were getting ready for football season in the fall. And when I grew up, Cedar High didn't even have soccer. And now here at Wasatch High, soccer is one of our highest participating. I mean, we have 100 or more kids try out to cut down to 30 or 40 in both girls and boys. And I mean, I grew up in a high school that soccer wasn't, I mean, we didn't even have soccer teams. And I think, they added them a year or two after I graduated. But I love that I had this experience that was so much different. And now we're hiring these young coaches and teachers that are coming up in the system that we're having to work in. So it's some of the old school stuff, which I hate that it's old school, but you participated in 3 and 4 and 5 sports in small towns. And I get that it's still that way in some spots. At Wasatch High, we've grown enough that it's not that way anymore. And when we can get a couple kids that excel and participate in 2 different sports, it's a big deal to us. And we still try to work together with our coaches, and all those things. But the model, I've been in education 26 or 27 years now. The model is different now, with both youth sports and high school sports than what we grew up in. And I love to pick the brain of these good young coaches that we're hiring and saying, okay, in some ways, more about this than us, because you were a club sport kid. You were a AAU kid. You were a kid that was traveling the country all summer long, and your parents were paying for it. And so how are you going to navigate it based on your own experience? Because you know better than I do. And so it's been challenging, as everybody knows, and it's been fun, and it's been interesting to cross my experience with, those that I get to work with now.
That's some great insight. Let me ask you this. I want you to share with our audience some of the mentors and leaders you had in your life that made a big difference. Obviously, your dad comes to mind, so speak about him, but then maybe some of the other people.
Well, I had a lot of different people, you're right. And I had some opportunities to have some people because of my mom and dad's jobs growing up. And especially when our family arrived in Cedar, and again, I was a young dude, and I don't really, I see all the pictures now, but I don't remember the old Wasatch High days, so all my growing up was in Cedar. And I had some built-in people because my mom was in Iron County School District for so long, and my dad at the university there for so long. But I mean, just being flat out honest, my 2 biggest influencers were my mom and dad. And honestly, I'm 50 years old. I turned 50 this year, and they still are. And they've both been out of, my dad's been out, retired for about 10 or 12 years, 13 years now. And my mom's been, retired from Utah for about 20 years now. And I still look to them, and I ask them, and I talk to them, and, how did you deal with this? And my mom's always awesome. She's always like, it's changed so much. Like, you shouldn't even ask me. Or, we'll use educational terms. And she's like, I've never, I'll say, hey, I got to go to a PLC conference. And she'll say, what's PLC? And I'm like, well, Mom, it's what you were doing 20 years ago. They've just found a new cool name for it. But I still look to them, but they were, if you would have asked me when I was 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, however old I was, what I was going to be when I was grow up, I would have told you I was going to be a teacher and a coach and an educator, because, my parents brought me into that world and let me run around and hang out with them. And I learned to play the drums when I was in middle school, because my mom was the Maui Tawa advisor, the drill advisor at Cedar High, and they needed somebody to ride in the back of the truck in the parades and keep the beat on the drum set so the girls could march in the parade. So, they brought me into that world, and I've never left it. And so they are by far my biggest influencers, and still are. And, again, there's some other people over the years. Growing up, I loved Dick Hobbs. And Dick Hobbs was a kind of a legend in Cedar, and for a lot of different reasons, but he was a phenomenal legend at Cedar High coaching, and was good friends with my mom and dad. And then he kind of got out of coaching for a while. And then actually when I went into high school, my freshman year, there was some turnover in the basketball program and things, and he coached. He kind of came back for a second stint at Cedar High. My 4 years I was in high school, and then he retired and got out for good the year I graduated. But when I was growing up, I probably didn't know Dick would have been a mentor to me. But now that years have gone by, and Dick's passed away, and I've thought about things over the years. He just had a super good perspective. He had a life outside of coaching and teaching. He loved to hunt. There's countless stories about him getting stranded up on the mountain, in the middle of the night during turkey season, and having a baseball game the next day, and how he's going to get back to school. And just and he had a good work-life balance. And I think it's taken my time in education to look back and say that a guy like that would have been a mentor or an influence on me. And there was a lot of guys over the years, but my parents were definitely the people that have influenced me the most.
That's fascinating. Thanks so much for sharing. Ryan, what's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
I think I'm still learning, for sure. And it's when you ask me that question, it's absolutely the first thing that pops into my mind. And I just referenced it with Dick. I think over the years, I've struggled a little bit with a work-life balance. And so I definitely haven't fixed it, but I've had this wonderful opportunity to be in some of the best school. And of course, I think most of us, if we're happy in our jobs and happy as educators and teachers and coaches, we think we work in the best school or the best district. And we go tell everybody, that the school that we're working at's the best, right? And that's awesome. And that's what sets us apart as educators. But, I had a phenomenal experience at Bear River High School. I was a young guy trying to make a name for myself. I came out, got a head coaching job at 24, 25 years old. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I knew everything. I thought I had all the answers. But as I look back at it, I was clueless. But I'll tell you what, I poured my heart and soul into it. I get the Davis High football coaching job at a young age. I poured my heart and soul into it. I sacrificed everything for it. I had a wonderful experience. I was surrounded by some just incredible people at both Bear River High School and Davis High School. I was a head football coach in high school for 16, 17 years, something like that, and kind of decided I needed a break. I had gotten my admin. Rob Cuff gives me an opportunity to go to the state for a few years. Wonderful experience. Before I took this situation up here at Wasatch a few years ago. But through it all, I think I've lived my work life like I was 24, trying to make a name for myself all the time. And I think you've got to have a work-life balance. You've got to have some things. You've got to have some hobbies. You've got to, realize that your family's sitting there for you, and your kids and all these things. And luckily, I think most of us that coach and teach and pour our world into it, we get to take our kids with us most of the time. And that's a big deal. And even you and I have talked about that before, Hutch, and you have your grandkids, and, you have a son-in-law that's rolling and doing all the things. But it's just, I think that's one thing that it's been a constant work in progress for me is trying to have a work-life balance as an educator.
All right, well, let me just ask you a follow-up. So when you go to Bear River, so did you take Coach Cox's place there, or was there someone else in between?
Well, for 1 year, Dan, so Coach Cox left, and then there was Perry for 6 or 7 years. I can't remember his first name, and he did a phenomenal job. Dan went to Mountain Crest.
Right.
And then Doug Perry, I think was his name, and he had a great run at Bear River, and people loved him. And then he took a job in Nevada. And so I was never there with either one of those guys. And then Jeff Kiltz took the job at Bear River for 1 year, and I was hired as a PE teacher and a coach, and Jeff left after 1 year. So I was 1 year as a assistant and a teacher and coach, and I got the head coaching job. So, I mean, 1 year into education at Bear River High School, which was a premier 3A school at the time. And I mean, I was just like, I can't screw this deal up. And I thought I knew way more than I knew. But you know, it worked out, and we had a great run of kids, and I had phenomenal assistant coaches. I had wonderful administration, and honestly, they weren't going to let me fail no matter what. And as I look back at it, I don't know how I mean, I think it was because of the people I was around and surrounded by that we were able to have success. Hey, I got to tell you this while we're on this podcast. We have a secretary here that gives me a hard time about that all I ever eat is French fries and that I love fries. Literally, while I'm on this podcast with you, she brings me French fries in.
I love it.
She has sat these on my desk right here while I'm talking to you. So she must have gone there and brought me French fries. See, that's
well,
she knew I couldn't come back at her because I was on this meeting, on this call.
Yeah, that's great. That's funny. Let me ask. Well, the reason I ask you about the Bear River is when I was still coaching football. It was back when Cox was still there. Yeah, that would have been in the 80s before he went to Mountain Crest. So, I mean, we played, Jordan and Bear River played preseason every year. I'll bet home and away at least probably 10 years worth. So that brings back memories. So let me ask you this before I go on to your time at the UIAAA. What's it like to be the son of a famous football coach? And well, you think about it, your dad in I guess there's Lavelle at the D1 level, and then maybe Coach Mack. But your dad was at SUU for so long. I mean, he was a legend.
And, no, my dad is, and you know, yeah. I mean, Ron McBride in the state of Utah, and Lavelle, obviously, you know, is the legend in Utah. You know, there's all these guys and all these things. But as far as small college football and you know, the coaching factory and obviously all the things with the PE department and the educational deal down there during those years. I mean, my dad had just an awesome run, and he's a humble guy, and he would never say this. But you know, he had opportunities. He had opportunities. He you know, I remember 1 year I was in high school, and University of Wyoming was kind of going through a coaching change, and I mean, they called him. And, you know, and he looked at some opportunities around at different times, and he and Coach Edwards at BYU had a phenomenal relationship. And I think he had a couple different opportunities to go as an assistant, you know, in different capacities at BYU. And he would never tell you that. And he was as happy as could be at Southern Utah, and he was always pushing himself and challenging himself. And again, at the same time, my mom was an educator, and she was at Cedar High, and she was doing awesome things. She was winning state championships and drill team, and, you know, teaching dance but it was such a cool, as I look back on it now, it was such a cool way. And sometimes you fight it growing up, like, right? Like, everybody in town knows me because of my dad. I can't do anything. And, you know, my dad's over here at the college, and my mom, you know, is at the high school. And so, but as you look back on it, the opportunities that I had and I have now were because of them. And I mean, I've done a pretty good job of keeping track of all the guys my dad's coached over the years. And it kind of starts to run together now because we're all getting older and we're all, you know, gone different ways in education. But I mean, especially when I was coaching, we could not play a football game when I was at Bear River or Davis High, and somebody or multiple guys on the staff across the sidelines from us had been coached by my dad or gone through SUU or done the coaching factory deal. And and it's still that way. And now it's just different because we're all getting older. We've become ADs or gone into admin, and some of the guys are still coaching and that. But I mean, even like the UHSA just hires Chris Shipman, and I mean, he played for my dad. Chris is about my age, and I mean, there's guys all over, and it hasn't changed, and it's awesome, and it's afforded me relationships and opportunities that I wouldn't have had, without it and without that experience. And so it's been even better now that I'm a little older and got to than when I was growing up. I don't think you realize those things kind of when you're going through them, but yeah,
Sure.
it's been phenomenal. And I love going places with him and coach and hey, what's up? And yeah, it's been really cool.
Well, I wanted to ask about your move to the UHSAA, and let me preface this because that I didn't know you when you were up at Bear River, but I had gotten to know you when I was the AD at Jordan, obviously, and you were the head coach up at Davis. I know you won a state championship up there. And my perspective back when you took the job is I'm wondering to myself, my goodness, he's a young coach. He's got it all. He's up at Davis. He's got good kids coming in. And so I'm thinking at the time, not knowing you that well, why you took the job at the UHSAA. So talk about that transformation from coaching then into athletic administration for a minute.
Well, there's a couple different things. Is I wanted to be a head football coach so bad. And I got that opportunity. I kind of lived my career in reverse a little bit. And what I mean by that is I had this opportunity to be a head football coach. And I don't remember what it is now. I could do the math, but I was literally 24, 25 years old, 1 year as an assistant and a PE teacher. I get this head coaching job at Bear River. Again, we have a great few year run there, and I get the opportunity at Davis, and there's some ups and downs, and I kind of followed a legend in Jimmy Dixon. We and did all these wonderful things for all these years, and then we kind of changed some things, and there's some, I mean there's some, I mean that's tough. You come in and
you mess with the double wing at Davis.
Yeah, exactly. There's all these traditional things, and I mean it's not that we changed just for the sake of change, but I got the job and we had to do what I knew and so, we went through some of those things. We, again, great people around me, great administration, great players, parents, support, all the things. And I kind of made this run, and in the middle of it, and family things and all that, I decided, hey, I'm going to be in education forever. I got to get my master's. So I called my mom one day and I'm like, Mom, I got to do this so I can get a salary bump. And she's like, whatever you do, get your master's in administration. And even if you're never going to go into administration, or whether you're going to go into next week, at least you have the opportunity. Here's my youngest son, Bodie. He's a freshman at Wasatch, and he comes in and out of my office about whenever he wants. So,
I remember when he was like,
oh, and look what Bodie
went.
Look
he
what
went
Bodie
for the fries.
Right, for the fries. So, yeah, there you go. All right, have a good day in class, Bodie. So then, and he just told me he's not going to class.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, as I got my admin, a bunch of the guys that were in my cohort who were awesome teachers and coaches in different schools in Davis County School District. I mean, Jason Smith was one of them, and he's the principal at Northridge right now, and Sean Johnson, an assistant at a principal at Bountiful. They were all coaches and teachers too. Well, as soon as we finished the program, Casey Layton, who's in the district office, as soon as we finished the program, they kind of all moved into admin within the year or two. And I still kind of had a bug to coach, and I was coaching and doing this. And my principal at the time, D. Burton, came to me and was like, hey, you got your admin. Let's do some TSA stuff. You teach one day, you come and help us in the office one day, you help Coach Welk with athletics a little bit, do some things. And obviously, and honestly, there were 5 or 6 or 7 years after I got my admin that I was still afforded the opportunity to coach, but I wasn't teaching every day. I was doing some teacher on special assignment stuff, and I loved it. But I kind of told myself during that time that I want to make a difference in education outside of just the football field. And I kind of fell in love with admin during that time. And I said to myself, I'm not going to coach forever. I'm not going to be the guy that does it for 30 years and they run me out on a rail because we won 3 games that year, or because I didn't play so-and-so's kid at quarterback. And again, I don't know why. I don't know. That was just kind of my mindset. And because I got a head coaching job at a young age, and because I was hired at Davis High at a young age, I had a good 16 or 17 year run. And when this UHSAA job came up, I kind of just felt like, hey, it's time for me to go try something else. It's time for me to maybe put myself in a position where I can learn from someone else, get out of Davis County maybe a little bit, as much as I loved it, and see what was going on in the rest of the state. And, and Rob and the staff at that time gave me that job, and it was awesome. I loved it. It was, I went right from coaching, right from the sidelines, doing a little TSA stuff, to getting thrown into dealing with everybody else's problems, athletically throughout the state. And I mean, there probably isn't a time in education, other than the first couple of years that I came here, that I learned more about athletics than those first year or two at the state. And I don't know. I've never been, my worst thing is, and I tell people this all the time, and I never ask this of people when we're interviewing now, but if I were to sit in an interview and somebody were to say to me, and I know this question gets asked, and I'm telling you administrators out there not to ask this question, but I get it. Some people like it, and that's just my opinion. But the worst question I hate is, what's your 5-year plan? Now, I get you got to have a plan as a coach or a teacher, a principal or whatever. But for me, in education, I haven't had a 5-year plan. I've just gone as hard as I can go in the job I'm at. And then when I feel like I need a change, I look for a change. And my career's kind of worked out. I've been super fortunate. And so I mean, there wasn't a rhyme or reason like why then for the UHSAA. I was just like, hey, I got my admin. I've been doing this other thing. This looks like an awesome opportunity. I'm gonna go do this. And I did. And it was awesome. I loved it. And I'll forever be indebted to Rob for giving me that opportunity.
Let's have you speak for a moment about the job of today's athletic administrator, today's AD, and how you see it's different from when, well, when you first got into coaching at Bear River and you knew the AD and first became acquainted with the high school AD. And of course, you knew your father before that. But so talk about how that job is different today than it was. And let's exclude the COVID year, because that was a nightmare for everybody. But how is that job different today in your perspective?
I mean, it's the exact same conversation as we had a minute ago with how youth sports are different now than they were 30 years ago when, we kind of went through the youth sports system. I mean, it's not harder or easier now or then. It's just so much different. And I mean, like, we're super fortunate here at Wasatch. Like, we have a full-time athletics secretary, Brad Foster, who's kind of our day-to-day athletic director. He's kind of moved to a real small teaching schedule. So, we have him freed up. I mean, arbiter and register my athlete and eligibility and working with your coaches and all the sanctioned sports. And it's just so good to have a full-time athletic secretary to keep us straight on all the buses and arbiter and register my athlete. Then Brad is just a day-to-day boots on the ground with coaches and parents and athletes. And then, I'm the administrator that kind of oversees it. But, Brad and Sarah, our athletic secretary, it's so important, I think, now in high school that you have to have eyes on athletics every hour of every day. I mean, with all the sanctioned sports, the spring season being so huge, the buses, all the things we've already mentioned, I think you can't just have one person in any size of school, kind of making sure you're going in and out of the coaches get what they need, or that the athletes are eligible, or that the parents are, kept in check. And I mean that respectfully, or, that the district office is getting what they need you have to have eyes on it all the time. And as I talk to other people across the state about what their model is, I think there's a lot of good models out there. There's 100 different models that schools and districts are using and going back and forth into, but whatever the model is, education-based activities and athletics has to have eyes on it every hour of the day, because it's absolutely the pinnacle of our communities, whether you're at Cypress, Taylorsville, Rich, Desert Hills, or Wasatch High, it's the pinnacle of your little community. And you know, we're into PLCs here at Wasatch High. We're into teams, teacher teams. We're into raising our test scores. We're into doing all these things, and we're working hard at it. And I've tried to redefine my career to learn that stuff better, to support teachers and students. And I've really enjoyed getting to the academic part of my career. But at the end of the day, we're not getting raked over the coals if our math scores go down a point, or if they go, or we're not, you know, riding the fire engine if they go up 5 points. Now we're doing some internal celebrations, and we're working hard with our teachers and our students to create that, but it all culminates with activities and athletics in a school. And so because of that, I think that's what's changed the role of ADs and athletic administrators and coaches is I mean, you have to be paying attention to it all the time. And that's what I love about you guys and the UIAAA and and you know, all the education that you're continuing to give the ADs out there, because it's as important as it ever has been. And it's not getting less important, because if it was getting less important, our problems would go away, and they're not.
Yeah.
You know, the stakes are high right now with parents and athletes and you know, and what people want to achieve through it. So
I want you to speak for a moment about the recent UIAAA conference, and speak for a second about the award you received there.
well, I was super humbled through that award, and I've loved the UIAAA conference in the last few years. I've been so ingrained into being an assistant principal at Wasatch, and it's kind of always been prom weekend for us, and you know, different things. And I haven't gotten down there as much as I've wanted to the last few years. I loved going down to it when I was at the state. When I was at Davis before I went to the state, I went to it every year. It's a phenomenal thing. And the UIAAA is, I mean, I can't say enough about the organization, and there's a couple stalwarts in it. I mean, Mark Hunter, Hutch, you're a stalwart. I mean, Richard Barton, Everett, K. Apollo. Now you got the, you know, the up and comers, like even, you know, Lee Gilly being involved in our region, and, you know, just all these guys that are a little older than me and a little younger than me and my age. And I love that we're keeping that going. And I was, you know, when Everett called me and said, hey, you're getting this award, I was incredibly humbled, because I've been at that conference for years and years and years, and seen you know, administrators get that distinguished contributor, or what, you know, the administrator of the year award, and those were dudes, guys, gals, people in education that I've looked up to, and that I've wanted to be, and so to know that I was thought of in that same thing was super humbling to me.
Excellent. Let's have you talk for a minute. What's one common myth about being an athletic director that you would like to debunk?
Oh man, that all you do is go to games. That all you do is sit and watch games. I mean, even yesterday out of our lacrosse games, I mean, Brad's running around. I'm trying to help him. I'm going back and forth to the school because we had to host it. We had to host our games yesterday during the day because we had graduation last night. And and you know, we had 2 home lacrosse games during the day, and we're all running around. And I heard a couple people say to Brad, "Oh, I love your job. You just get to watch games all day, you know," or And I'm just like, you think that's all we do, or Brad, or he does? I mean, it's just, but in that same breath, I can't get too bugged that that's all people think we do, because it is a pretty dang good job. And my dad used to say, and now I get it, that that I've been in it 26, 27 years, however long I've been in education, that I don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life. This is a pretty good job, pretty good things. We get to interact with kids. It keeps us young, you know, and we are going to games. And even though there's a lot of work in between those games and during and before and after and all that stuff, it is a pretty good life that we live to be able to do that. So on one hand, I get bugged that people think that all we do is sit at games all day. And then on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, we're pretty lucky that we get to do that.
Well said. What's the favorite part of your job, Ryan?
Absolutely, positively, is working with our young ladies and our young men, our our athletes, but all of our students. And really, it's why I only stayed at the state for 3 years. I loved it. I loved getting to know everybody at the state. But my second year at the state, I was down at the I don't know, it was one of the smaller classifications basketball tournament, 1A, 2A, 3A down at Sevier Valley. And so I had been out of a building for a year or two, and I was down there running the tournament. And I'm watching the emotion with the coaches and the ADs and the administrators from those schools as I'm giving the championship trophy, and seeing how those kids bonded with their teachers, coaches, principals, and I missed it. And I thought to myself, we get to run all these wonderful championships and we get to provide all these awesome opportunities, but we don't have relationships here at the state the way you do in a building with kids. And that's why I got into education. And again, I will forever be grateful to Rob Cuff for giving me that opportunity. But really what that opportunity taught me was that I want to be in a school, and I want to be in a situation where I can make a difference for kids and I can help kids and coaches. And so that is by far, my reason why is being able to work with kids every day.
Appreciate that answer. Let me finish up with a couple of questions. The first being, I've got 2 suggestions from Ryan Bishop for a new athletic administrator. They need to follow these 2 suggestions in order to be successful. What are Ryan Bishop's 2 suggestions?
I'd say number one is be flexible. I think we all have guidelines, we all have policy, we all have protocol, but at the end of the day, I think you have to look at each circumstance, each situation, each person, kids or adults that you're dealing with, and you have to try to see things through their eyes and their shoes. Because it's easy to be over here and it's easy to say, no, this is the way we do it at Wasatch High, or this is the way it's going to be, but we, I think, are in the business in our jobs of educating people. We're not just educators from 8 to 3 and during the school day. When we chose to be teachers, coaches, and administrators, we're in the business of educating people. And part of that is you got to be flexible. And I think being flexible means that you're really stepping outside of yourself and looking at what, the circumstances on the other side, and then trying to meet people halfway. The second thing is build relationships. I don't think you can have success in our jobs, especially as athletic administrators, if you don't have relationships across the board. And that's even with the parents that are on your butt, and or with the coaches that are causing you a hard time, or the coaches that maybe you think don't like you, or whatever. You really get outside yourself and go try to work to build relationships. You're going to find common ground with people. I had somebody tell me a long time ago when I was at Bear River, a parent was on their butt, and it was another head coach in our building, and causing them problems. And he said to me, and I was kind of on obviously choosing sides, and I chose his side. And I as I remembered, I was kind of venting about this parent to him. And he said, well, you and I didn't take these jobs to wake up every morning and ruin kids' lives. We took these jobs to make kids better and to make parents better. And so we have to understand that we're dealing with their most prized possession, and we've got to give them some grace. And I've never forgotten that. And I've not always done it. And I still struggle with it this day. But when I can remember that it's about building relationships and giving other people grace, things have always gone better for me professionally in what we're trying to do with kids or teachers or coaches. And again, I need to take my own advice many times, but I think those 2 things, be flexible and build relationships, will get an athletic administrator a long way.
Great answers. Thanks so much for sharing. Ryan, what's one question I should have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh man, Hutch. I think you need to ask me what my favorite thing to do outside of school is, because remember, I'm trying to create a better work-life balance.
All right, well, let's have it then. Share with our audience, what's your favorite thing when you're away from Wasatch High?
When my dad got out of coaching about 23 years ago and got full-time into being an athletic director, he's always been a horse guy and a rodeo guy. And we kind of started my younger years with horses and things. And then when he was a college coach for all those years, we didn't have them. And so I was a little bit older, you know, in college and such when he, and just graduating from college, when he got out of coaching, and he got back into the horses at that time. And so I got into him again a little later in life, probably early in my 20s. And it was kind of a way my dad and I could bond. And it's been awesome. And I love horses. We've got a couple horses now, and I love to team rope. And I'm not very good at it, but I try hard and I go hard, and I spend a lot of dang money trying to do it. And it's been a big deal to me, and it's been really fun. And it's been something that kind of a hobby I've picked up later in life that I hope I can keep doing until I'm 80.
Well, that's great. That's something I didn't know, and thank you for sharing that. On
So
that
you go to the
note,
golf course, I go to the horse pen.
go to the horse. There you go. On that note, that wraps it up for this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guest today has been Ryan Bishop, the assistant principal at Wasatch High School. Ryan, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
I love it, and thanks for letting me beg you to be on here, Hutch. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Appreciate you being on. For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.